course, done flipped it out here. Okay. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get started here. Happy Monday, everybody. Happy Martin Luther King Jr. Day. It is a great day to get out to the community, especially. I know most schools have the day off. We're in a different situation where we don't have the day off. So I think it's kind of important to make sure that you take a moment out of your day to recognize Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Martin Luther King was a very, very well-known civil rights activist, if you don't know, and I think he's very important to emphasize. So if you don't know anything about him, or if you've never read any of his speeches before, or some of his sermons, I highly recommend that you do that. It's super, super important for you to understand that period of time in history, and especially as a civil rights activist, I think he is somebody very significant even to this day. So I encourage you to at least look up something about him throughout the day, or at least contemplate the Civil Rights Act and what happened during the Civil Rights Movement. I encourage you to reflect on it at some point in time, okay? I know this is not a civil rights seminar, but I kind of wanted to talk briefly about it because it's something worth recognizing. It's a very significant day in history, and it is a nationally recognized holiday. So, how it is. Is it okay if I take off my face mask?
Yeah.
Good. All right. So I'm socially distanced for everybody. We're good. All right. So again, happy Monday. We're going to go ahead and get started here. I hope that you have got a composition book, or at least your computer set up with a document to take notes on. It's something I highly encourage you to do. Yes?
Are you recording this time?
I'm sorry, what?
Are you recording this time?
Yes, I am recording. Yep, it's on. It's recording. I know for sure now. So, and then I'll tell you guys, we do have to kind of backtrack just a little bit. I'm going to backtrack to what we were going to talk about on Friday. We're not going to have the discussion like we did on Friday. I'm really kicking myself in the butt that it didn't get recorded. It's not a big deal. So we'll go back to what happened on Friday, and we'll kind of go over it real quick, and then we will move into the overview of German history, okay? So we're running pretty fast today, so hopefully you guys got your note-taking skills brushed up on. You have your computers out ready to go and take notes on, because we're going to dive in pretty quick. We're going to cover about 1,000 years of history, actually probably more like 1,900 years of history, in just a little over an hour, okay? So it's going to be pretty intense, so hold on. It's going to be a bumpy ride. Let's go, okay? All right. Scroll down here to it. Here we go. All right, so I'm going to kind of dive in. We've already talked about this on Friday, but like I said, it wasn't recorded. We're going to talk a little bit about counterfactual history or counterfactual arguments, okay? It's important to understand this, especially in our modern day and age where truth and fiction are very, very fluid together. Let's put it that way. A lot of things you look up, a lot of history stuff, conspiracy theories are very highly known on social media platforms. They're known on Google. They're known everywhere else. And a great way to understand this is if you can formulate a what-if question to history, the factuality of it is probably not true, okay? So here are some things that have happened here, okay? There's a couple of points. What if Germany won the war, right? That's a great argument to entertain. What if Germany won World War II? Okay, what if Germany won World War I? How would our world look like, right? Those are fun to entertain. They're fun concepts to look at. However, they're not going to give you a factual and honest truth. That is the problem that could happen with that, okay? Again, what if Hitler survived his attempted suicide and escaped? You're going to see stuff online everywhere about Hitler surviving his suicide, his attempted suicide, and how he escaped to Argentina or went to Russia. You've heard this stuff before. There are countless of documentaries out there. I spent about 8 hours over the weekend trying to figure out films we're going to watch throughout this seminar. And quite a few of them had talked about this conspiracy theory of how Hitler somehow managed to escape and he's living on some island with Elvis and an alligator pet and just stupid stuff like that, okay? It's not something that is factually true, okay? The evidence proves that Hitler did attempt suicide after chewing a cyanide pill. He did kill himself. He shot himself in the head, okay? We cannot entertain these points, okay? These are not points worth entertaining. And if it's brought up in an argument, we cannot use these as factual truths, okay? Like I said, they're fun to entertain. If you're sitting around the house, you want to just have a nice conversation. If you're bored, it's great to talk about, but don't examine those as true fact, okay? And don't believe those to be true either, okay? We are not going to entertain these arguments, as I said, okay? We're going to be understanding that, okay? We already talked about it. If we entertain these what-if questions in an assignment, if you entertain those what-if questions in a discussion, I have to give you a 0 for that assignment for the day, okay? That's my ethical policy. That's the reason why I do it, okay? We have to understand the facts of the matter. We have to understand how to synthesize those facts before we actually get diving into the lecture and stuff like that and other items, okay? Here is the overarching question for the seminar, okay? This is how we are going to structure our learning. The question is, what led to the rise of Hitler and Nazi Germany, and what were the results of those actions, okay? If you ever feel like you're lost in a seminar, if you don't understand something that's going on, if you have no clue, look back to this question, okay? You will make a very, very clear understanding. Now, the answer to this question is not simple at all. It's very, very difficult to pinpoint the factors that had gone into the rise of Hitler and Nazi Germany and the ultimate fall of it, okay? It's very, very difficult to understand. It's not something easy to make a grasp of. Historians have argued for it for nearly a century now, okay? And we're still to the point where we're discovering new information about this. Now, we already talked a little bit on Friday about the geography of Germany. I hope you watched that video. It's about 14 minutes long. We already watched it on Friday. If you have watched that video, great. If you haven't, I encourage you to do that. But kind of looking over at the geography of Germany, okay? Again, I'm going to kind of re-emphasize these points real quick. Understand that Germany is the world's 5th largest country. It is known heavily for its gold, its steel, and timber exports, especially in the southern region of Germany, the southern half, as you can see there. It is about the same size as Montana, okay? So keep that in mind. It's the world's 5th largest country, and it's the size of Montana. It just kind of goes to put in perspective how big the other side of the country is. In terms of per square mile, that's the size we're looking at there, okay? It's also known as the land in the middle. There is no real distinct, clear borders, but there are natural borders that bind the east and the west and the south around it, okay? We have a mountainous area crossing the east and the west area, the Alps in the south, and then in the north you have the Baltic Seas. And then a majority of them are mountains as well. You have the Alps, you have the Ore and the Hart Mountains. And then what you have is the northern German plain. Okay, this is the area that borders between East Germany there and Poland. Okay, it is a very flat region. There is a large amount of vegetation that goes on there. Wildlife is out there. But other than that, there is no distinct border to separate it with Poland. Okay, other than that plain. We will find throughout this seminar that it's going to change your mentality a little bit, okay? Hitler decided to invade Poland first in 1939, specifically for the reason of having this northern German plain there, okay? We'll talk a little bit more about that. Look it up in the CIA fact book, you'll find more information on that, okay? Now, we talked on Friday about the concept of Reich. Reich, not Reich, but Reich, okay? Reich is German for empire. Okay? There are 3 Reichs in German history that it should be examined. Historians have looked at it and they have determined specific dates. However, it is a little controversial. We'll get into that in just a second. We know the First Reich to be the medieval and the Holy Roman Empire. This started around 800 in the Common Era and ended at about 1806. Okay? This is where it once before in 8 Common Era. We found that there was a lot of struggle going on. We'll talk about the war that would happen during that time to become the medieval and the Holy Roman Empire during that era. Okay, that lasted about 1,800 years. Okay, long time. Then we see the Second Reich, which we call Imperial Germany. That is from 1871 to 1918. I will have you note here that 1806 and 1871, obviously there's a gap in between the Reichs, right? This is where Germany was established as about 300 different little city-states, little city countries, basically, is what they were. They weren't a specific Reich. There was no empire during that time. So historians kind of argue whether it was 1871 where it got back into play, but we know with Otto von Bismarck, the founding of the Republic, the Imperial Germany in 1871 is really where it goes. So that's why I put that in there. And then I put number 3 here, number 2A, if you want to call it, is the Weimar Republic, okay? The W will make a V sound in German, okay? So you have Volkswagen, you'll hear Volkswagen too. You will look at Weimar, or we'll look at Emperor Wilhelm, which is technically spelled Emperor Wilhelm. So the W's sometimes will make a V in German, so I hope you know that. The Weimar Republic starts in 1918, ends about 1933, and then we'll dive into Nazi Germany from about 1933 to 1945. Okay, that's the technical dates of when each of these Reichs started. Now they do overlap each other a little bit here in between the Weimar Republic and Nazi Germany, and we'll talk about that specifically later on. Okay, let's dive into it then. 9 AD, you have the Battle of Teutoburg. Okay, the Battle of Teutoburg is very significant in the fact that there were about 20,000 German soldiers that were killed, okay? And at this time, at 9 AD, before that happened, Germany was not totally unified. There were a bunch of small areas. It was a very feudalism type of setting where it was not a unified country. There was a bunch of smaller city-states and city areas during that time, okay? In this Battle of Teutoburg, it was a single battle. I'll show you that in here in a second. It is a single battle. It is not a war, but a single battle where 20,000 people died. Okay? This is very significant to German history. We also have airmen. The H obviously makes a silent H sound, so it's airmen. In Roman, if you look at the Roman scripts, his name is Anaximus. He is considered to be the hero of the Battle of Teutoburg. Okay? And Hitler and many of the people in the different Reichs have referred to airmen as one of the greatest leaders of Germany. And it is, according to Hitler, is one of the persons that you should aspire to be. You should be a leader who is willing to give up their life and be reckless for their country, essentially, is what he's talking about. Okay? Then we have, after the battles with the Romans, you have the Magna Germania. This is where, at the end of the war, it's an agreement to share the border with the Roman Empire at the time. Okay. However, there was still a result even after the Magna Germania, where there were attacks with the Roman Empire along the Danube River. Okay.
Whoa.
Oh, sorry.
I'm not even telling you.
All right, I'll back up.
That's why
I'll give you guys a second. Anybody have any questions on that right now? Okay, cool. I'll give you just a second to look. Sorry.
Like 3 minutes.
Like I said, I'm covering 1,900 years of history here in 60 minutes here, all right?
This is not crash course. You are not.
We're not giving us any time to write notes.
All right. Let me know when you're ready.
Yeah, I'm not even too mad.
Who's the slowest writer?
I'm a terribly slow writer.
Everybody raises their hand. All right.
If I write fast, I can't read it, and it's unlegible. It doesn't make it. Yeah.
I forgot to tell you guys, there is also on the Google Docs page, the seminar schedule, you will see an outline of all of this information. It is online for you to be able to see too. So it won't just be the PowerPoint, but I also have it in a Google Doc format. So what would be cool if you guys wanted to, before the seminar, if we're having something like this, a dynamic lecture or a general lecture, if you wanted to have me print off a couple of copies of that for you guys, I can do that for you. Okay, so if that's something that would kind of help you expedite your note taking, that's fine. If you prefer not to do that, that's okay too. Okay? I'm sorry?
I would like that.
You would like that? Okay. I'll get a list going on it. Okay.
Will we
Yeah.
have access to the sources you used to make this?
Yes. Yep. And all of these sources actually were taken from the Hitler Nazi Germany course that I took while I was in college. That's pretty cool too. So you'll see a lot of that too.
Teachers college stuff?
Yeah.
What
I'm
does
sorry?
your teachers college stuff?
My teacher does college stuff?
No, you're teaching us college stuff?
Yep.
The point.
Yep. Whoa, mind blowing, right? I'm teaching you college stuff. Crazy. Yeah. Yes. I'm sorry.
What does that mean?
With Magna Germania, it's like a peace agreement. So if you ever heard of the Magna Carta before, it's very similar to that. Yep.
Can it hear us?
All right, you ready?
Yeah. No, wait.
You guys can go back and get this here too. I mean, it's okay. All
All
right, I'm gonna move on. Here we go.
I
Okay.
have a picture.
Fast forward about 1,400 years. Okay. This
Sorry,
is where it
lady.
gets weird. We see the collapse of Rome in about
Oh my
500
gosh.
AD. I'm sorry. Oh. I see the collapse of Rome in about 500 AD. Okay. Then we see the rise of the Holy Roman Empire. This is the First Reich. Okay. In that case, Germany is going to take most of the occupation. Okay, because most of the area, geographically speaking, had spoken German. This is the reason why Germany was wanting to take that occupational area. However, there was massive confusion on who actually possessed the First Reich, who actually possessed the empire. And it is argumented to this day, according to historians, on whether or not it was followed. Okay? It was a debate on which country was more holy, which country followed the Catholic values a little bit more, which one was responsible for the collection of taxes, which one was responsible most for royalty or property. Okay? So it is very, very difficult to understand that. And it caused a lot of confusion in terms of what happened. Okay? Now, the Holy Roman Empire's purpose for their occupation of Germany at the time was for what? Does anybody know? Money! They wanted to collect taxes. That is the main reason. So it could fuel their wars. It could fuel the further expansion of the Holy Roman Empire. Yes, sir.
So it was basically an early version of America.
You can say that. Yeah, you can say that. Arguably, when we talk about imperialism, this is where we're going to see that being very active, right? The idea of taking over another country to exploit their resources, to collect taxes from them, and basically to oppress them is kind of the way it worked. So Germany, in a way, during the Holy Roman Empire, was treated like a dog. They were oppressed during that time, is what you can call it, for the lack of better terms. Okay. Then we see during the Holy Roman Empire the rise of Martin Luther. Okay, I'm sure in most middle school classes you've ever taken, you've heard of Martin Luther if you've at least seen this ugly mug right here. Okay, you've probably heard of Martin Luther. If you have not yet, he's kind of an interesting fellow. He really was a guy who didn't really mess up history, but he really rocked the world. Let's put it that way. Okay, he really rocked the world. Now, here's what is interesting. Martin Luther was German. He spoke German, and he went to a monastery in Germany. He was a monk, okay? Luther decided that he was fed up with the Catholic principles, the Catholic values, the Catholic ways of life, and he began to attack the papacy, or the Catholic political realm that involves the Pope, and he involved Rome in that matter, okay? He also established the 95 Theses, which are grievances against the Pope and the Catholic Church at that time. He established those 95 Theses in there. Now, he established those not for just religious reason, but he established it for causing insurrection and asserting political control over the empire. Okay? So he wasn't saying that it was a religious issue that was coming about with the idea of indulgences, or you pay to get rid of your sins, according to the Catholic Church. He wanted to assert that political control over the empire. He had this idea of creating a better Germany. Okay? And the reason why we're talking about this is that there is evidence that Hitler took a lot of his influence from Martin Luther. And we're going to talk about this here, I think, next week, next Wednesday. We'll be talking about the idea of anti-Semitism. Martin Luther was an anti-Semite. Okay, when I say anti-Semite, he was against the Jewish population. Mr. Weber, see you later. He was against the Jewish population. He was against the religion of Judaism. Okay, and we're going to talk a lot more in depth about that next week. I don't want to get into it now. And he also viewed that there was a need for a superior race of people. He believed that there was this idea of creating a superior race. And he believed that to be German. Okay? This is Martin Luther. This is not just Hitler that believed this. Okay? He also believed this idea to create a Germany, as in a country, a republic, a German empire over the Holy Roman Empire. Okay? These are important things to know. Now we'll get into a little bit about Hitler and his idea of being a Protestant, because he believed a lot in the values of Martin Luther at the time, and he was considered to be a Lutheran by his aspects of how he practiced his religion. However, he did not believe in the fallacies of the modern Christian principle of the belief in Jesus Christ. He believed that he was a God himself. So that's where the idea of Christianity is then a failure on Adolf Hitler's part. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that next week. Okay. All right, I'll go back.
Yeah, this is lots. We're good.
And like I said, this is all on a Google Doc in the seminar schedule too. And you can also find it in the PowerPoint physically. You have access to all of those items too. So hopefully you got your ideas going. I'll try to make it shorter. Does anybody have any questions on this? This is a very important part of history, and a very important part of world history. I wish I had more time than just, the next 5 minutes to talk about it, but it's very, very important. Yes?
How would he create Germany?
How would he create a Germany, is what you said?
Yeah, because it says.
Yeah, so he had this idea of creating a German people, a German empire, one that speaks for themselves, a unified thing. Because prior to that, in the Common Era, prior to Martin Luther, it was under the control of the Holy Roman Empire. And even before that, when we look at the Battle of Teutoburg and the German wars, we see that, or the Germanic wars, we see that there was no unification at the time. There were still little city-states, there were still feudalistic ideals. There was no one unified country under one political power, one government, necessarily. Great question. Yeah?
So for a timeline in my head, did the Martin Luther, did this take place after the First Enlightenment of, straying away from God in, the humanistic period, I guess? No. So Martin Luther was kind of before that time. He kind of sparked it, basically. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so when we go into the 1500s, 1600s, and 1700s, this is where you're going to see those Enlightenment eras occurring, where the idea of moving away from a deity and going into an idea of the sake of science, the sake of just general living and progressing as a human being is more prominent.
So one could argue that due to his political views, he kind of influenced the Age of Enlightenment.
Sure.
Humanism?
I wouldn't argue with that. No, I would say that's a great point. Yeah. Yeah, Caleb.
Is Martin Luther and Martin Luther King and Martin Luther King Jr. and kind of.
Unfortunately not. No. I don't know anything because we were talking about Martin, and today is Martin Luther King Jr. Day, right? I don't think there is a direct correlation between those. Maybe his mom decided to call him Martin Luther because she knew that he would be a reverend. I'm not exactly sure on that. I could do some digging into that and see, but I'm not exactly sure. So I would say probably not. No. We do know that Martin Luther King was a Protestant, but I don't think it has anything to do with his religion necessarily. All good? Ready to move on?
Yeah, I just finished.
Yeah? Cool. I got tired of looking at that face.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Does anti-Semitism have any religious basis, or is it just
Well, we'll talk a little bit more about that. So, it was on a religious basis, just a general denial for Judaism at the time because they blamed the death of Christ on the on Judaism, basically. And that's where this idea of bad blood kind of comes about.
Okay.
But over time with Martin Luther, he says, well, it's not necessarily the hatred of Judaism, But Martin Luther was kind of responsible for creating this idea of anti-Semitism and the idea of a hatred not just for the religion, but for the religious people. And we'll talk more about that next week because that is a very important point, especially when we talk about the rise of the Third Reich. So, yeah, it's very important. Okay. All right, so again, we'll talk about the Protestant Reformation and Germany's involvement here. We see the rebellion against the political control of the Holy Roman Empire, okay? Obviously, with Martin Luther and the change of being unified under the Catholic Church and this fragmentation that goes on, it occurred not just throughout Germany, not just throughout the Holy Roman Empire, but the entire world, okay? Understand that. King Charles V was the Holy Roman Empire king at the time. He was kind of a terrible ruler. Like, he did pretty good in terms of his expansion, but once he got expanded, he went a little bit too far in his imperial conquest, and he was trying to hold off attacks from 3 different countries: Spain, France, and the Ottoman Empire, okay? And what had happened with this is he was spread himself a little bit too thin, and this resulted in a constant warfare. It resulted in battles upon battles that really the Holy Roman Empire could not hold together, okay? And here's what happens. Charles V, because of the issues that are going on with border wars and stuff like that, he did not have the tolerance to deal with Martin Luther. So what does he do? He exiles. He outlaws, okay? Martin Luther, though, was interesting because he was actually protected by the religion he established, which was the idea of the Lutherans. He was protected by those Lutheran religious leaders at the time. So what happens here is there's this tolerance between Charles V and Martin Luther, right? What's going on? The development of Protestantism, and then you have the development of Catholicism that are living in the same place. Obviously, tensions are very high, and they're even high to this modern day. If you look at Ireland, for example, there's a huge divide between Catholics and Protestants, to the point where there is a wall that separates them. And you better have a good reason for going on to the other side. So the Lutheranism and Catholicism really divides the Holy Roman Empire, divides the country, okay? And one thing that really specifically stuck out during this time was Martin Luther wanted to translate the Bible to German from Latin. He basically, the Bible was written in Latin. The masses, or the Mass, which is an expression of a church service in the Catholic faith, was in Latin. And he said, well, in order to better serve God, we want to translate it to German so that the people can better understand it. Well, the Catholic Church did not like that because it was very untraditional. And this is where we also see this development of anti-Semitism come about too. The Latin religion and the German religion clashing together. Latin obviously speaking better. And then we have the Hebraic language going on too with the Torah and the Talmud in the Jewish religion. And this is also a fuel to the fire for anti-Semitism. And this is where, as Layla said a second ago in a question, where we start to see not just hatred for the religion, but hatred for the religious people, specifically. Ready to move on? No? Okay.
We just started B.
Just started B. Anybody have any questions on it? I'm sorry?
Could you move my left, your right?
You may move this way? Can you see it? What point are you looking at? Oh. Yeah, if you guys have to take pictures, you can do that. Again, it is on the schedule. It is also on the Google Doc there for you too. Yeah?
Where do I find this at?
Under the Hitler and Nazi Germany seminar schedule, have you seen that yet?
No.
So there's a couple different ways to access that. That's through the ICC third term seminar schedule. You can see it on there. There's a link to it if you scroll down. And it's also, so you'll see the resource tab there. Go ahead and click that link, and that'll get you to my website. From there, there's a drop down at the top right. Go to seminars, click on that, you'll be able to find it right there. Cool, so that's a couple step process, but what I would recommend is bookmarking my website to your bookmarks bar, and then you're easily able to access that at any time. Yeah.
So for like the protection of Martin Luther by the religious leaders of the Lutheran Church, is that also extended to not only like political protection, I guess, but also like resources, as in like housing and it's like he was able to survive from that, or did he have like another way?
I don't really know the answer to that. If you're talking about economic reasons, perhaps. We know later on in the Protestant religion that they kind of went against their own idea of separating from the Catholic Church through indulgences. Through the sense that even to this day, if you go to a Protestant church, you're still having to hand money as an offering, right? And there's this idea of the relief of sins that goes on there too.
I just didn't know if that like there was an extension of he was gaining financially from that, so that might have like urged him and financial and
Maybe.
power to like continue with it, I guess.
Maybe, yeah, I don't know the answer to that, to the economic purposes of the Protestant Reformation. I'm sure it had a lot to do with it, but I'm focused more a little bit on the political and religious aspect of it. So yeah. Alyssa, did you have a comment to make, or did you?
No, I just asked myself a question.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, no, you're good. Alright, I'm gonna go ahead and move on here. Alright, so again, in 1555 we have what's called the Peace of Augsburg, okay? This is basically the idea of the Protestant Reformation and the divide between the Catholic Church and the Protestants to kind of make peace with each other. Even though it was still very bitter and quite disgusting, and they still ended up turning on each other quite a bit. And a great quote from the Peace of Augsburg is, "As the leader chooses, the people follow." Okay, it's a great classical conservative principle, and we see this actually being said in many of Adolf Hitler's speeches later on. Okay, and he's talking about this for religious reasons. As the leader chooses, as Martin Luther chooses, the people follow. As the Pope chooses, I forget who the Pope was at the time, the people will follow, basically, okay? Now, the leaders in the provinces of the Holy Roman Empire were given the option to choose between being a Lutheran community or a Catholic province. They had two different options where they could choose from, these different leaders. Now with this, you had to choose between a system of hierarchy in the Holy Roman Empire, or the Catholic Church, and then you also had this development of feudalism, which happened during the Protestant Reformation. And if you don't know what feudalism is, it is this idea, it is very similar to a system of hierarchy, except in the fact that you pay taxes to a earl, or to a certain leader of the community. Anybody ever watched Vikings before? None of you have ever watched Vikings?
My dad watched it.
Waiting on it.
It's so good. It's very violent, but that's the era of the Vikings. But they do a really good job of looking into the idea of feudalism. I encourage you to check it out. It's pretty good. So yeah. Next, I'm going to show you up here.
Don't change it.
Don't change it. Okay. I was going to show you a map of the Calvinism, the Lutheranism, and the Catholicism divided Germany. We didn't really talk about Calvinism. Calvinism was a stem of the Lutheran, so Calvinism is a part of Protestant religion. It's still active to this day. The concept of Calvinism, I can't really get into detail about, but from a theological perspective, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I don't want to get into too much more because I don't want to offend anybody or anything, but Calvinism is the belief that you were either born good or you were born bad, and you don't really have a choice in life. Whether you can become good or you can become bad.
I mean, I guess,
So it's kind of weird.
I guess that's kind of like, a lot of religions have that. I mean, like,
Yeah.
in, like ancient Egypt, like religion, like, if you're born a peasant, the only way to, like, actually have an afterlife is in order to be, like, a pharaoh or someone's,
Yeah.
like, highest
To be
servant. So
So-
you're just doomed.
Yeah. It's kind of weird. Yeah, Kelsey.
HRE.
Holy Roman Empire. Sorry, I abbreviated it because saying Holy Roman Empire is like blah 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 blah. You get really tired of saying it. Yeah, Morgan, what's up? Yeah. Alyssa, do you have a question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like everything was just based on religion, like no matter what.
Yep, yep. Church and state were not divided at this time. Yeah, there was no division between them. The religion was the law,
So
and
like
law
they
was
had-
religion.
So like they would have to follow what the church said no matter what.
Yep. Or what their earl said if they were in a feudalist area. Yep.
So basically, like if they went like Catholic or something like that.
Like, if they have-
Or like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so if you were Catholic, if you were a Catholic community, you followed the commands of the Pope and the Catholic Church.
But what if you don't? That's what I'm saying.
Oh, you would be brought up on charges, you could be executed,
For now.
yeah, for perhaps not following the religion, especially amongst the leaders. The leaders were known to have this idea of being a pure characteristic and to follow the Catholic faith or the Lutheran faith effectively. And if you didn't, then you would be sanctioned, you would be exiled, you would be executed, brought up on charges, you would lower your rank or status in society. Yeah.
So you could literally lose everything.
Yep. Yep, you can literally lose it all. Yeah. Yeah, it's not very fun. So it was very totalitarian at the time. Yeah. Okay, ready to move on?
Yeah.
Let's go. All right. So here you can see kind of the map on what's going on. What's interesting about this map? So this is a map of Germany and the Holy Roman Empire, basically. Most of Europe, you can see. This is kind of the top looking down of the globe. So you're looking down like southeast where it is. What do you see?
Purple.
No
There's
yellow.
Not very much Anglican. Around here in England, the Anglican Church was very well known, the Anglo-Saxons. And that's more of another time. Look at the divide between the Catholic Church and the Anglican Church. They also didn't believe in it, but they still wanted to follow the Catholic values. So yeah, that's something important too. Top is mostly Lutherans here, right? Yeah, most of it's Lutheran up here, right? So we're seeing the spread of the Protestant Reformation being effective, right? People are moving away from the Catholic Church. We can see that.
Where's the yellow?
I'm sorry?
Where's the yellow?
Is there a bit of
Where's the
down at
yellow?
bottom?
Unitarians? Yeah, so
Yeah.
there's some here.
Oh, I
That's
see
Yeah.
it. That's literally it.
Yeah.
Or maybe that little dot. What little dot? I don't
Maybe.
know.
Here, I'll get it for you guys.
Yeah. nice.
Oh wait, I see
Like
it.
right
I see
here.
it.
Oh yeah, a little population
Wait,
there.
go down. Go. Did you see the one that's like right? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And then there's another
Yeah.
one underneath.
Wow. I don't know how you guys see any of that. I'm blind.
I'm like
Is it hard to
blind, so
see?
I really know.
Yeah.
Alright,
I'm
I'll
also
try to
sitting right
figure it out a little bit better.
Go for a single.
But what is the overarching concept of this map?
Lutherans dominate.
Lutheran dominates, right? The Lutheran faith dominates, basically. But what else? What else is interesting about this? I'm looking for a specific answer.
It has control over that large canal. That someone likes to
Control over the large canal, okay. What else?
Some places have mixed religion.
Right, right. We're in an area, let's just say the area of Germany here, where you can see where I'm pointing at. The area of Germany is heavily contested, right? There's quite a bit of Lutherans, but you're also seeing Calvinists, you're seeing Lutherans there, you're seeing other religions here, the Catholics are living here, Roman Catholic, Eastern Orthodox. There are so many religions going on in this area. It is messy, right? It's hard to even read it. Vanessa even said that, right? It's hard to read this, okay? So understand at the time that this was not just oh, we're going to cross over into the Eastern Orthodox community, or oh, we're going to cross into the Lutheran community. No, it was, we don't know what we're going to be practicing, and everybody's practicing their own thing, so now we're just going to create this mass chaos, basically, is what it comes down to. So it's kind of interesting to see that. All right,
Oh, even more.
now we're going to dive into the 1600s here, okay? The 30 Years' War, okay? Why do they call it the 30 Years' War?
It lasted for 2 years.
It lasted for 2 years. No, it lasted for 30 years, literally, okay? Now, this was a movement, basically, not just a war. It was a movement from this religious issue of the Protestant Reformation. It then turns back to being a political issue, right? We're talking about the idea of land and the changing that's going on in land, and this is where we go. We have to understand, though, the idea of the 30 Years' War, okay? Look at the Holy Roman Empire in 1618, okay? The Holy Roman Empire had 21 million people. It was known as to be the largest in Europe, okay? 15% of that 21 million people only lived in the cities. The remaining 85% resided in rural areas, areas of feudalism that were going on, okay? Here's what's interesting. Most of the populace of the Holy Roman Empire, that 85%, were extremely poor, and they were tied to their land for survival. Whatever they had to get, they had to reap what they had. Okay? Therefore, with this conclusion that we made as historians, it was not a society made to withstand long warfare and devastation. This idea of having individual city-states based upon religion is not effective. Okay? It was not a society made to go along with war. They weren't generating any more soldiers than they were generating farmers, because they created a taxation class, a class that was designed for taxes. And they were so oppressed during that time that they had to demand to stay on their land in order to make a living. Okay? Now, this idea of war, the 30 Years' War, was disastrous for the Holy Roman Empire. Okay? Here are the effects to Germany. The Holy Roman Empire lost up to 70% of the total population. 70% of the army's population was lost in the 30 Years' War. Okay? Now, we also see, not only did that 70% decimation happen, but we also see the idea of going from 21 million people to 16 million civilians that was recorded, not the ones that aren't recorded, in the 30 Years' War. We're losing essentially, how many? 5 million people that are recorded, 5 million people in the 30 Years' War. As well, we see this massive economic downturn. You see quadrupling debt, okay? In the 1600s, they had $6 million, or I think it was francs, 6 million francs in their currency in the 1600s in debt, okay? That was 6 million at the time. Now you have to think about it, what it would be today. Probably billions of dollars, perhaps maybe a trillion. I don't really know. I'm not very good at currency values, but it's kind of interesting to see that, okay? And here's what's interesting, is the economic downturn is mostly caused by this attempt to bribe the other side. It was mostly caused by the attempt to bribe the other side. Lutherans bribing the Catholics, Catholics bribing the Lutherans. It was an issue. Bribery was extremely popular then, and that's what it cost. Any questions on this slide? Okay, we gotta keep moving on here. So, good? Good? No? All right. 20 seconds. I'm thirsty.
20 seconds?
I'm gonna grab some. Yeah, 20 seconds. Go.
War was bad. Nukes done.
By the way, make sure that you're taking notes, because I'll be checking your notebook on a weekly basis starting we'll do it next Monday. We'll be checking notes, okay? So make sure that you're taking notes if you can.
What are you grading on?
Basically, I'm going to pick out a certain point in your notes, and if you hit the note point, you get it. If you don't,
What? That didn't make any sense.
what?
I mean, like, are you grading participation? Like, how much information you wrote down?
I'm writing the whole thing.
I'm just
How
gonna
much
pick. I'm gonna pick a
percent?
specific point in your notes. So if you write literally, let's just say next week, I'm gonna rate it over the Protestant Reformation. Look at it over the Protestant Reformation. If you just wrote Protestant Reformation down, probably not. But if you write Protestant Reformation and a couple points regarding to it, probably get a 10. It's either you write notes, you get a 10 out of 10, or if you don't write notes, you get a 0 out of 10. That's
So if
basically
we're
what it
writing
comes out.
almost exactly what's on the board, we're gonna do.
You're gonna get a 10 out of 10.
Okay,
You're-
thank God.
Okay.
I can't read
Because
it.
that's
I write
exactly
really
what I've been
fast.
Yeah, I don't care about your handwriting. I don't care about what you write. It's your notes. But what I'm concerned about is your note-taking skills, and I'm concerned that you're paying attention in class. Okay, that's what matters.
I'm trying to listen.
You're good. All right, ready to move on? No? Okay,
Is the next slide more writing?
probably.
Oh no. Oh my gosh, I have mint gum in my mouth and now my eyes are burning.
And I'll tell you this, guys. Like I said, we're covering 1900 years, 2,000 years of history in 60 minutes. So that's why I'm kind of really speeding through this, kind of working through it, okay? Alright, I'm gonna move on. Okay. The 30 Years' War ends in how many years?
30.
30, great job. Look at you, Lee. Good job.
I'm a genius.
Ends in 30 years with the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648. Okay? Germany is officially divided religiously. Okay? This weakens the Holy Roman Empire, so it formally ends later on in 1648. The map and geography then of Germany and the Holy Roman Empire becomes a complete and utter mess. Historians can't even pinpoint a map on what borders what, basically, because they don't understand it. And Germany basically ceases to exist because of this. There is no culture at the time. Germany is losing its language. And what happens is Germany then becomes a collection of hundreds of different kingdoms. At this time, about probably, 300 different kingdoms existed in Germany. And remember, Germany was about the size of Montana. So just think of Montana divided into 300 different kingdoms.
Montana's not even real. You can't prove
No, that's
it. Have you been
Wyoming.
to Montana?
Wyoming
No,
isn't
I've
real.
never been to
I
Montana.
haven't either, we can't
I
prove it.
have.
This one has.
Guess not.
You're a liar.
Going to somewhere that was not.
It's a state. I know
Aliens.
it's part of the union, so that's all I can tell you. Okay.
Wyoming doesn't exist.
So Germany basically ceases to exist at this time. Germany does not exist. There's about 300 countries, 300 different individual kingdoms. I guess I can't say countries. Different individual kingdoms existing at this time in this little area. Can you see the problem that would occur with this? What's the problem?
A lot of people fight for power.
A lot of people wanting to fight for power, fighting for land, right? 300 different kingdoms existing at the time. They're probably going to want a piece of the land so they can start conquering each other, right? This is not good. Not very good at all. So the 30 Years' War was not a very happy ending for Germany. Okay? But
Who won the war?
who won the war?
Technically,
Holy Roman Empire.
really?
Yeah.
Even though it falls apart within a year, and then
Mhm.
Germany, is it because like Germany just kind of doesn't have a political or economic body? It's just
Yep. Yeah, it's basically a total bust. Okay. It's not it's not good for either
it's
side.
like Philadelphia.
And you'll find with Germany, if you look in history, when they sign treaties, it's not very good for them. So keep that in mind. It's not very good. Okay? We good? Ready to move on?
No, I'm really behind right now.
Alright. 10 seconds.
What's beast?
I can't.
Just 10 seconds. You guys can want to look at it later. Okay. What? I'll talk about this picture here.
I just gotta
Okay?
get B.
This picture is the signing of the Treaty of Westphalia. Here it is an oil on canvas. I'm not sure how true it is or not, but I guess people in red tape for the people who died. There's other
Wow.
stuff that goes into this painting here. It's kind of interesting, the historical value of it.
Stupid little idiot.
There is evidence that Hitler did have this painting at some point in time.
Wait a minute.
You have like a large
In
art collection.
paintings of old people gathering in a place sign treaties and have a
Yeah.
congregation.
Yep.
It's always painted like a TV show. There's no walls.
Well, as you can see here, they're not socially distanced and there's no mask going on either. So watch out. I know, right?
No,
That's
no, for
why
me.
we have COVID now, guys.
They're the sole reason we have COVID. They are the cause.
Yeah. There we go.
In the Holy Roman Empire.
All right.
Whoa.
Moving on. Moving on.
You know how they have live painters? Do you think they have one there? Is that what they do?
I don't know. I have no idea.
So funny.
This is an easy slide here, guys. So we'll move on. This will be an easy slide. Hi, guys. What's up?
Hi.
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 Here we go. Moving on. As I said, Germany divides into about 300. You're good. About 300 or so small states and kingdoms. They're constantly engaged in small battles, little wars. Not producing any output. Basically, nothing is going good for them. Trading with other countries is difficult. Just because they're so small, there's no need to trade with the United States at the time. It was big. Okay?
Do you want
So-
some spices?
From 1648 to 1871, basically it's all hundreds of small states and kingdoms.
Wait,
Okay?
please go back. I didn't even write that.
It's hundreds of small states and kingdoms. 1648 to 1871. That's it.
I didn't even get that.
Okay, you gotta have to keep up a little bit better. Okay, here we go. So in 1850, hi, hello, what's up? How's your conversation going? It's okay. Let's get back to it. Okay, here we go. 1850. There's a growing desire for this nation to be called Germany. Okay. They figured out, if they didn't yet, in the 1850s, this idea of economics, trade, military power, business prosperity. Because of having so many different kingdoms, it did not help anybody. And by having these reasons, it was all reason for the need to develop a single unified country. Okay? Industrialization in the 1800s was on the rise of other countries around the globe, and there was this need then for trade and taxes and for Germany to basically modernize, is the point. The advancements of the 19th century, the Gutenberg press, different items in Germany that was developed were very prominent, and this idea of unification was not. They were still living in basically the ancient times, is what it comes down to. And so there was this idea of creating a single country. But here's the problem with it. What is the country going to look like? When you have 300 different little separate kingdoms, feudalistic areas, how are you going to unify Germany? Are you going to have a Grossdeutsch or a Kleindeutsch? Okay?
What?
A what?
Großdeutsch or Kleindeutsch? Okay. Großdeutsch, Kleindeutsch. Okay. Large country, or Germany, for example, or Kleindeutsch, a small country. These are debated highly between German philosophers.
I don't get it.
Okay. What?
I
It's
don't
German.
get it.
Gross is big.
I know, but
Deutsch, country.
wait, I don't get it. I don't
What do you
get
mean?
it. Wait, what? What would the country look like? Take all of the.
So
wait,
they're
how-
debating on whether or not to be a unified country or to stay as a smaller country,
but
basically,
it
to
wasn't-
divide Germany into 3 different groups
Okay.
instead of having 300 kingdoms.
Alrighty then.
Makes sense?
No. I don't get geography at all.
Okay. Let's just think if Indianapolis was a state
It is-
and Fort Wayne was a state
Yes.
and Lafayette, Indiana was a state and Evansville was a state, right? Would you want to have each of those as individual states, or would you rather unify them and become one single state? There's arguments for both, right?
Right.
If you're on the
Okay.
Kleindeutsch side,
Okay.
a small state, then you'd be arguing for Evansville being a country and Indianapolis being a state and this, right?
Make them all provinces
Yeah.
instead.
Yeah, or if you're in favor of a Großdeutsch, you'd be in favor of a larger country.
Right.
Now, the idea of the Großdeutsch is the concept of unifying Prussia and Austria. But the warfare will ensue, and it will still continue even with the Treaty of Westphalia and the Peace of Augsburg. There's also conflicts between the Protestants and Catholics that will create division from the start. You don't really need to know that. It's just something to just kind of keep in the back of your mind, basically. You don't have to write that down. Okay, I'm moving on.
Oh. Just right here.
1871, what?
Can you please go back? I have to write one sentence.
All right, we got 20 minutes. Hurry up. We're almost there. We're almost
What was
there.
the title of the last slide, the next slide?
Next slide title was Germany's Unification, 1871. You may have any questions on this right now?
Please ask her.
Do you want to learn some German here? Großdeutsch.
No.
Say it. Right after me. Großdeutsch.
Gross.
Großdeutsch.
Hey,
Good God, answer me. Can
Or
I pee?
Kleindeutsch.
Klein.
Kleindeutsch.
Oh my God.
Kleindeutsch. Not very well.
Not very well.
Not very well.
I'm
I only know
learning
this
Spanish.
stuff. That's it.
In Spanish, I'm learning German.
Oh, what was the name of
Un
the
Weg,
next
eine
slide?
Frau.
I don't know what that means.
That is, are you a girl?
Oh, see.
Frau.
Un Weg, eine Frau.
Yeah, Frau is a girl. And then,
So what? Oh, are you a woman? Yeah. Fraulein is a girl, right? I don't remember. I'm not good at this, okay? I just know the stuff that's.
daughter is Tochter.
What is it?
Daughter, Tochter.
Alright, moving on here. We're talking enough. Okay, Germany unifies. So we jump from 1850, 21 years later, to 1871. Germany finally decides to unify.
We're paying attention.
Okay, Germany decides to unify into the Kingdom of Prussia. Prussia is kind of interesting, right? It is primarily Protestant. Okay, the people that do not like Prussia is the Empire of Austria. We'll talk about that, okay? Which Austria, or Austrians, are primarily Catholic at the time of 1871. Where you have a Protestant in Prussia, Protestant religion is exercised, and then you have the Austrian Empire, which is Catholic, and they share borders with each other. What do you think's gonna happen? They're gonna fight like cats and dogs, basically. They're gonna fight like cats and dogs.
Some cats and dogs get along.
It's a figure
Cats
of
is the
speech.
snake. I don't. It's a figure of speech. They use it.
Thanks.
Okay. Germany is basically born of war. They're fighting Austria. They're fighting other countries near to them. They're creating this idea of a new Germany with a Catholic minority and a Protestant majority. Okay. This new Germany would be dominated by Prussia, with Austria basically taking as a backseat role as a colonized territory. What do you know about colonization? It's pretty bad.
Yeah.
Right? Historically it says it. Now during this time, to begin this idea of unification, there were three different wars that were fought. You have the Danish-Prussian War, the Austro-Prussian War, and then in 1870 to 1871 you have the Franco-Prussian War. Okay, they're not overly important to know. All you know is they fight against the Dutch, they fight against the Austrians, and they fight against the French. Those are bordering countries. They defeated all three of them, which is great for Germany. The defeat of France had caused the unification of Germany then, and it basically solidified Germany as a single country with borders because they had won all three of those wars. Okay. Yes.
Who were the ones again?
The Danish or the Dutch, the Austrians, and then you have the French.
Poor
Okay.
French.
The Franco-Prussian War is highly debated. If you look at French history and you look at German history, their accounts do not coincide with each other very well. So, just a little fact. Okay, I'm moving on. Then we have the proclamation of a German Empire. Okay, this is one of the most famous pictures of German history right here. Okay, you have Otto von Bismarck in the white uniform here. Okay, Otto von Bismarck is very important to German history. This is a picture of the announcement of the creation of Germany. You will see, like I said, Otto von Bismarck in the white uniform. This is taken in the Versailles Hall of Mirrors. You'll see the mirrors right there. Okay. There's debate, art historians debate about the Hall of Mirrors and what it really meant as a reflection of Germany's past and looking forward to the future of Germany. So it's kind of interesting there. As well, you can see Emperor Wilhelm I and his son right there in that picture. They're overlooking what would be the Second Reich, basically. You will also see raised swords, their hands up in the air. You will see helmets that are up in the air as well, which is kind of interesting to see because if you are going to do in the Third Reich, the development of this would go with your right hand would be raised up in the air. You've seen it probably before in different various movies where it is a sign of a saluting to the Third Reich. And this is where that development comes about. Yes?
Why are they all wearing the same, like, outfit if they're supposed to be against?
They're supposed to be against Germany?
Yeah.
Well, they're unifying the German Empire.
But yeah,
So,
I'm not quite understanding your question.
me either.
Okay. Yeah, so you're talking about why are they in different uniforms?
Yeah.
So it's got a symbolism to it. That's why von Bismarck is in white, because he's considered to be the hero of the country and known for unifying it to become a single German country.
White
And
is
the-
known as purifying, like a
White?
purifying color.
White, because it's a clean color, I guess. I don't know. It's basically what it was. Maybe just, I don't know.
white,
Threw it in with all the other-
white was
tarnished.
He bleached it or something, I don't know.
White was expensive because it was expensive. It was hard to clean clothes. The more you had to clean clothes, the more expensive it was to own the clothes and maintain everything. That's why wearing white was considered to be royal, because if you didn't do any work, you'd never get dirty.
Yeah.
So,
While you guys are finishing up your notes, I got a side story. I was watching this stand-up comedian. His name was Tom Papa. He was talking about the early 1900s and like the good old days. And he says, "Did you know that in the early 1900s they had to wear burlap underpants?"
Oh my.
And I'm like, "What? Like you had to wear burlap underpants? Like, can you imagine how comfortable that would be?"
What's burlap?
Not burlap. Have you ever seen like a burlap sack? Yeah. Have you ever seen a potato sack?
Yeah.
Oh,
Old
touched a
potatoes.
potato sack?
Yeah.
It's like,
Yucky.
It's it's very itchy and.
I
You
drew
would not want to wear it as a pair of underwear. But I guess that's what they did. I don't know how true that is or not, but that's what she said. So.
It's like cloth cardboard.
Yeah, that's a great way to explain it. Cloth card.
Was this the last one?
No.
Let's
Go.
I compare similar to
Okay. All right, moving on here. So then you have Imperial Germany, or also known as the Second Reich. This is what we're going to enter into. This lasts from 1871 to 1918. Okay, 1918 is about the end of World War I. That's what I'm going to place the dates at. Okay, there's debate on when the Second Reich actually fell. There's people that say it ended in 1917 and ended in 1916 when Germany went to war. It's debatable, but that's what I'm going to put it at the end of World War I. Okay.
Oh, what was the last date? What was the last date?
Yeah.
Thank
19.
you.
My goodness, you don't have to write everything. Okay. Second Reich.
Well,
You don't have to write all of this. Okay. You don't have to write all of this. Okay. We have the development of the Second Reich. Okay.
that's a lot. Can you tell us the most important part?
Yes.
Thank you.
So Germany is then established, right? We have the Second Reich. You gain a Prussian monarch, which is William I, who is the Kaiser to the German. Kaiser is king in German, and it was a precondition to the creation of Germany. Okay. They did not want this. They didn't want it to be a kingdom. They didn't want a monarchy. Okay. They wanted a single government republic structure. Okay. However, it was a precondition to the creation of Germany with the Austrians. Bismarck ran the Prussian government, and the Kaiser was the chancellor, or the lower person of the government. Obviously, with having two executives, if you ever take my government economics seminar, having two executives or two presidents or two people running the country, they're probably not going to get along very well, are they?
Nope.
So there was a rivalry between there,
Have
and
you ever watched
drama.
or read Narnia? There were
Oh,
4 of them.
Yeah, Narnia.
I love
Okay.
that.
Yeah, you can see that. Right, Otto von Bismarck stated he cared more for Prussia than Germany. He outright said that. He was kind of all right, well, we care more about this type of country than that type, and it's kind of interesting. Okay? But we also see this development of a republic style. We see the Reichstag forming. Okay, Reich obviously means empire, right? Reichstag is German for the empire's parliament. Okay, the process of getting into the Reichstag, if you were to become a member of the Reichstag, is only by popular election for the representative body. With that being said, only male citizens can vote, and the Kaiser, not the Chancellor, can override decisions made by the Reichstag. Okay, specifically on military tactics and treaties. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Okay, it is not a suitable way for fast and explosive growth of Germany. Okay, as well, you have the multi-party system. Okay, Now, you know, in modern United States, we have two political systems. What two political systems do we have? Democrats and
We
Republicans,
have
right?
more than that.
Well, let's just
But
say
those
here,
are two most
when the
of
Reichstag was
popular.
developed during this time, you had somewhere about 28 different political parties that were being represented in the Reichstag in the early 1920s. Okay. You have the conservatives, which are right-wing. You have the Catholics, which is a religious party. You have the Center Party, the Center Catholic Party, which is a central party. You have the liberals, which are somewhat left-wing. And then you have the socialists, which are far left-wing. And then you have the communists, as we see going into the 1920s, where they are far left-wing.
Pardon for the interruption. Will Michael Fugate please report to the high school
And then-
office? Michael Fugate, please report to the high school office.
And then we see the far right, which is what?
Nazis.
The Nazis, also known as the NSDAP at the time. They weren't considered the Nazis at the time. We gave them that nickname. Okay? The German army in the Reichstag had superiority over the Reichstag. The power of the military and the power of politics was very unequal. German military had superior power over the Reichstag at the time. Okay? Ready to move on? That's a lot of writing. Okay?
I'm ready.
Alright, we're getting close. We're getting close, guys. I know. Y'all are getting really excited here.
I messed up the thing.
10 minutes.
Wait, I have one more thing to write. One more.
We're getting. I have to take 10 minutes. I'll do that while you guys. Actually, if you turn in your quiz, I'll.
We have a quiz?
Yeah.
There. I fixed it.
We have like
Yep.
2 minutes left.
Wait, we have a
We
quiz?
got more than 2 minutes. We got 10 minutes. 9 minutes. All right, here we go.
Not have 10
Moving on.
minutes.
You better
It is
get one right.
56.
Okay, the Second Reich, though. Here's what's interesting. As a result of World War I and the German laws, prior to that, it was known to be a very high-tech industry. Okay? And even throughout the 20th century, we know it to be a high-tech industry, even with the rise of Hitler and Nazi Germany. They led the world in chemical, electrical, and pharmaceutical industries, period. At the time, there were 14 Nobel Prize winners, and it's very interesting to see that, right? We would think that if you were a country that struggled for hundreds of centuries, that you would probably not have a lot of very smart people, right? Probably not have a lot of great people doing great things. Well, it's the exact opposite for Germany, and this created a great sense of German pride. The population when the Second Reich was rising was 41 million people in the state of the German Empire. And in a matter of 40 years or so, it rises from 41 million to 68 million people. Okay? We look at their exports of coal, you see 285 million metric tons per year, whereas the United States in 1914 was only cropping out about
Give
75
your attention,
million.
Michael Fugate, please report to the high school office. Michael Fugate, please report to the high school office.
U.S. in 1940 used to have 75 million metric tons. Germany led the globe, period, end of story. Okay? The steel output was 14 million metric tons at the time, where the United States was at 1.5. Obviously, they also led the globe in coal and steel outputs. And if you don't know, those are very valuable resources. Okay? It's not overly important that you know, but I just want to put that in there for you. Okay? The Second Reich, you have Wilhelm II. This is also known as the reign of three Kaisers from 1888 to 1980. Okay, about 30 years worth. Wilhelm I dies suddenly. They don't understand why. They believed it would be a heart attack. The other guy didn't last a year before forced to being stepped down by Wilhelm I. Okay. Wilhelm II then takes the throne at only 29 years old. Pretty young. Okay. Germany found out that he is a complete psychopath. He was a basket case. Psychologically insane, clinically insane, just weird. He had this obsession with military uniforms. He was constantly dressed or seen in them, even though he never had served in the military. And then the German military, even though it was very powerful, criticized him and rejected him as a leader for his lack of respect for that. And the reason why he was psychologically insane is because he experienced nerve damage from his birth. His left arm was shorter than his right, and if you look at many of the pictures, you will see that he is trying to cover it up a lot. And he's known to be posed in these military uniforms being very thick.
I'm confused.
What?
Wait, So, the nerve damage caused psychological issues as well,
Yes.
and physical. Okay,
Yep.
got it.
Yep. And so with that going on, he develops this massive authoritarian personality, period. He wanted to prove his toughness to the rest of the world. We can see that in the photos alone, but we also know that he took a very powerful and assertive stance to the military and many government issues. Okay? His agenda was to build a big military, especially in the naval force area. Okay? England did not like this at all. Okay? The agenda was to expand their domination through colonization and imperialism. Okay? This was a trend of the early 20th century. It's not that Germany wanted to do this, it was because they wanted to compete with other countries. And this is what we know as the scramble for imperialism and colonization. This also allows for connections with other countries to fall apart because you were colonizing so fast and areas of resources are being taken up. Alliances with other countries and trade is going away. Wilhelm only wants to work with the yes men who did not question his authority. He created this massive instability in government because of this. He exiled the people that told him, no, we can't do this. And anytime somebody said yes to him, they would be praised. Okay? The powerful country then becomes extremely unstable because of this unstable person. And this is what ultimately kind of leads to the outbreak of World War I. Here's the quiz. You guys ready?
Do we do it on our own paper?
Yes, you do it on your own paper.
And then you turn it into you, right?
You turn it in right to me. Yep.
We got like 4 minutes.
I'm not taking the whole so wow, I wrote like 3 pages worth of notes. Who asked? I didn't allow them to have them.
Who asked? Who asked?
No, more like 5. I wrote like this.
All right, here we go.
Are they all 2 parts? Can I quit?
There you go. Go ahead and turn them in when you're done. I said it shouldn't take you long to do this.
Bro.
Don't forget to put your name on it, date.
We're not allowed to use notes, right?
I'll let you guys use notes for this one. If you want.
Thank you.
What? I am all the way back to part 1.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
I wrote it down.
I wrote that down somewhere, but I don't.
I'm just writing it. I just screwed up.
Everyone's splitting. Everyone's split.
Give me a flash.
I wrote everything, so.
I didn't get everything.
And I'll just tell you why you guys are taking it. There are 13 quizzes that you're going to take throughout the seminar. I will keep your best 10. So if you feel like you didn't do very well on this one, I'm going to throw out your bottom 3 scores, and the top 10 will count. I will record all 13.
What if I don't know the answer?
I don't.
You can put I don't know or leave it blank, whatever you got to do.
Okay, I don't know.
And like I said, for now, we can use notes from probably quiz number 2 on. I probably won't allow you guys to use notes. Thank you.
I can't learn like this.
I probably did terrible on this.
Sorry. Thank you.
I wrote that down.
I think it's true.
I think Wednesday we're going to go into German anti-Semitism, which will be a lot of fun.
Really? Why?
The first strike was created in
Okay.
the Holy Empire.
Yeah, that's fine.
Hey, that's wrong. Where are we turning him in at?
notes if I can't use them on the test?
You don't have to ask me questions.
Shit, alright.
Thanks, guys, for your patience.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll try not to run so late next time, so you guys have a couple minutes to have. Yeah, go ahead.
Is it gonna be not fast paced all the time?